Well, welcome everybody to our January Athletic Speaker Series here at St. Francis High School. My name is Michael Pulowski. I'm the Director of Athletics here at St. Francis. And we welcome you and thank you for attending our speaker series tonight. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker here in a minute. As we go through the presentations, if there's questions that come up that you have for the speaker, we encourage you to place them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and being able to allow the speaker to answer some of those questions towards the end. So with that, I will tell you a little bit about our speaker tonight. We're very excited to have Dr. Amy Bender here. Dr. Bender is a senior research scientist at Calgary Counseling Center and an adjunct assistant professor of kinesiology at the University of Calgary. She received her PhD and Master's of Science degrees in experimental psychology from Washington State University, specializing in sleep EEG. She has helped develop the only validated sleep screening tool for athletes and has implemented sleep optimization strategies for numerous Canadian Olympic and professional teams. Her current interests focus on how sleep and exercise interventions can improve mental health outcomes. A former college basketball athlete here in the States, she's done an Ironman in 2009 and currently chases around her 3 young kids. And so, Dr. Bender, we welcome you to our speaker series tonight, and we thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, and to St. Francis Athletics for having me here today. I think it's amazing that you all are talking about sleep. I remember when I was a college athlete, and my coach would tell me, make sure you're getting good sleep, make sure you're getting 8 hours, but kind of that was the end of the story. So I think it's great that you're featuring sleep as a performance enhancer. And so today I'm hopefully going to give you some background on why sleep is important for athletes specifically, but then also give you some take-home strategies to use and to utilize while you're kind of in a downtime right now while you're not competing. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see here. So the first part of the talk, I'm going to talk about the science of sleep and why that's important. And then we're going to get into specifically why sleep is important for athletes. So what does sleep do? Why is it important for an athlete? And then in part 3, we are going to talk about the strategies. So I know there's some parents watching, some coaches as well. So what can you do as an athlete? What can you do as a coach? What can you do as a parent to help emphasize sleep for your athletes? Okay, and as far as learning objectives go, at the end of this presentation, learners will be able to identify what good sleep is, dispel some common sleep myths, and then also apply sleep strategies to yourself. Okay, so let's start off with the science of sleep. Before we get there, I'm going to be doing some live polling as a part of this presentation. So you can scan that QR code, or you can go to slido.com and join at this meeting number 46128. So go ahead and join. For this one, let's open it up to everyone, parents, coaches, athletes. And I'm just really curious, how have you been sleeping during the pandemic? So go ahead and enter the poll, and this is going to be a word cloud. So the larger the word, the more responses are of that word. So let's see what happens. So we have someone put in later. So they're sleeping much later. Okay, just okay. Varies. Great. Ooh, I like that. A nice large great there. So we have people sleeping more. Good, great. I like it. We got 51, 53 responses up there. Going to give you a couple more seconds to input. Okay, so it looks like, I love these responses. Nah, that's awesome. So Here we have a lot of people are sleeping better during the pandemic. A lot of people are sleeping potentially later. Some people sleeping longer. In general, what we see when we look at the research related to sleep in the pandemic, we see a lot of adolescents actually sleeping better during the pandemic. And that's because their chronotype is they're later, they're more of that night owl. So they're not having to get up really early to get to school on time. You know, they can just wake up right before. And so that's really interesting. We see a small percentage of adults who are sleeping worse, but we see some that are sleeping better for some of those reasons. So thank you for participating. Don't want to talk about it. What's up with that response? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So why do we actually sleep? Well, as sleep scientists, we kind of debate this, and there isn't a clear-cut reason as to why we actually sleep. We don't really know the answer to this. We can't really agree. A lot of the studies look at depriving people of sleep and then figuring out kind of what's going on when we deprive someone of sleep. But I really like this quote by Dr. Alan Rechtshafen. If sleep does not serve an absolute vital function, then it's the biggest mistake the evolutionary process ever made. And it's true. I mean, we sleep about a third of our lives, so there must be some importance to this. And I really like that quote there. I want to move into the 3 keys for optimal sleep. So let's talk about these keys. The first one is related to quantity of sleep, or how much sleep you're getting. I'm going to open this up actually just to the athletes, because there is some variation in the amount of sleep that you should be getting. So I'm really curious if the athletes out there, if you could go, same thing, fill out this question. How much sleep are you getting on a nightly basis, kind of currently over the past 1 to 2 weeks? We got 22, 24 responses. Great. Keep them coming. I'll give you a little bit of time to fill that out. This is awesome. I'm so excited. There's so many people out there joining. Okay, let's see what the results here are. So we have 72 responses. We have about 42% reported between 7 and 8 hours, so that's not bad. We had about a third reporting between 8 and 10, so that's great. And then we had about 18% report between 6 and 7, 9% report less than 6, and then we had about 1% report greater than 10 hours. So let's go ahead and talk about how much sleep high schoolers should be getting. So here we have a graph with the different ages along the bottom, and then we have the hours of sleep across a 24-hour day. So we see in dark blue here is the recommended amount for the age group. If we go down to a teenager, let's say, so the recommended amount for a 14 to 17-year-old is between about 8 and 10 hours of sleep. Now, this is just for a teenager. This isn't necessarily an athlete per se. So for us, scientists working with athletes, we really do believe that athletes do need more sleep than just the average teenager, just because of the demand on the body and the brain, you know, the cognitive demand as well. So honestly, you should be aiming for a minimum of 8 hours because of the fact that we do think athletes need more sleep than the average person. So here we're looking at 8 to 10 hours would be the recommended amount, with light blue may be appropriate, 7 hours, 11 hours may be appropriate. And then the orange would be not recommended. So again, we see 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night for a teenager. And I will be giving you a little quiz at the end, so you need to kind of pay attention. So many of you may be thinking, I'm fine on little sleep. I'm probably just a short sleeper. I don't need to get as much sleep as everyone else. But when we look at the research behind that, we know that you can't really adapt to sleep loss. It's like you need a certain amount, and of course that changes as you age. So the younger you are, the more sleep that you need, and then the older you get. So an adult would need between 7 to 9 hours. Um, they've looked at short sleepers who are legitimate short sleepers. They looked at a father-son duo who needed 5.5 hours of sleep per night, 4.5 hours of sleep per night. They were waking up refreshed. They had no memory impairments. They were just killing it on this little amount of sleep. And when they looked at how common that was, it actually ended up being less than 1 in 4 million people had this gene mutation. So the chances that it's you is very, very slim. So I want to stress the fact that, you really should be trying to meet that minimum. And as I will show you, the research shows the more sleep you can get, the better you will perform. And what happens in the brain when we're sleep deprived is we actually become poorer with our judgment and recognizing how our performance is. So when they look at people during these studies, they'll show objectively their performance is horrible. Like they're having lapses of attention, their reaction time is really long. And but what they're reporting is like, oh, I'm doing great. My performance is fine. And there's kind of a disconnect in the brain. So that's something to be aware of. You may think you're doing great, but in reality, your performance could be suffering with sleep loss. So that's something to keep in mind. I want to talk about quality of sleep because it's not just about quantity of sleep, it's about the quality of sleep as well. So I could tell someone to be in bed for, 10 hours, but if they're tossing and turning, it's not going to do a lot of good. So we have to be concerned with the quality of sleep in addition to the quantity. So let's go ahead and have the athletes rate their sleep quality. So how would you rate the quality of your sleep? So go ahead and answer for me this question. Okay, I'm going to see what the results here are. So this is great. It looks like about 65%, over 65% are reporting that they are satisfied with their sleep quality. We do have some people who are neutral, about 11%. And then we have about 20% who are somewhat dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with their sleep. And I helped develop the athlete sleep screening questionnaire, which I'll tell you about a little bit later down the road. And this was one of the most important questions for us, was to ask people, how would you rate the quality of your sleep? And we found that this question really was reflected in overall kind of sleep disturbance. So if someone was very satisfied or somewhat dissatisfied, it would be a bit of a red flag for us to kind of look into their sleep a little bit deeper. So I am happy that the majority are satisfied with their sleep. We may want to, look a little bit deeper into those who are dissatisfied, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So what is good quality sleep? We talk about good quality sleep, but what is the actual definition? And what we find is that people who fall asleep in less than 30 minutes typically will report to have good quality sleep. They tend to only wake up once per night, and that awakening usually is about 20 minutes or less during the night. So they may wake up to use the bathroom, no big deal, they're back to sleep within 20 minutes. That would still be considered a good quality night's sleep. And then sleeping 85% of the time while in bed. So making sure that you're not awake too much during the night when you've decided to go to bed. So if we're looking at kind of what a real world example of this looks like, it would be someone who goes to bed at 10 p.m. Let's say they fall asleep within 20 minutes, they fall asleep at 10:20 and maybe wake up at 3 a.m. They're back to sleep within 10 minutes and then wake up at the day for the day at about 6:30 a.m. So that person would be getting 8 hours of sleep because they would be in bed 8.5 hours. They would be sleeping about 8 hours. It's taking them less than 30 minutes to fall asleep, so that's important. And then they do wake up once during the night, but they're right back to sleep. So with that example, it'd be someone who would be sleeping about 94% of the time while in bed. So it's something to keep in mind too, that it's not just about when you try and go to sleep and when you wake up and that equals your total sleep time. You have to kind of subtract out the time it takes you to fall asleep, potentially those awakenings during the night that you may not even realize are occurring. So if you're aiming to get 8 hours, you want to be in bed for at least 8.5. And it can be more than just kind of what I just described. There can be little awakenings that are occurring during the night. And one of my jobs was as a research assistant when I was going to graduate school was to score the sleep records for different stages of sleep. So here we have different brain waves, so different channels, electrodes across the scalp. And these are the different brain waves that are occurring during the night. And this is actually a little tiny awakening. They call it a EEG arousal, brainwave arousal. And it's less than 3 seconds, and the person doesn't even realize that it's happening. So it's so short that they don't even remember that it occurred during the night. So I think it is based on that definition that I described earlier, but it can also be on a more micro level as well. So here's a myth. Coffee in the late afternoon doesn't hurt my sleep. And there was actually a recent study in adolescents where they gave the teens a energy drink at dinner time. And they asked them, how do you think this impacted their sleep? And to them, they fell asleep normally. They didn't seem to wake up during the night. So they were like, this doesn't impact my sleep. This isn't doing anything. But when they looked at their sleep for those different stages of sleep, they found that they were getting 20 minutes less of deep sleep, and which is huge. This is where growth hormone is being released. Tissues and muscles are being repaired. And so to them, that energy drink didn't really do much to their sleep. But when you look at it on a more micro level, these different tweaks that you make can be impacting your sleep and can hurt your sleep. So it can, particularly in that study, the caffeine impacted the amount of deep sleep that they were getting. Let's talk about timing. So chronotype is kind of that biological preference to be a night owl or an early bird, a morning lark. And what we find is that about 15% of us are morning types, like to wake up really early, go to bed early. 15% are evening types, more of those night owls who like to go to bed, after 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And the rest of us kind of fall in between. But it does change as we age. So one of the things, the myths that I hear is that kind of teens are lazy for wanting to sleep in. And I got into a Twitter war one time with I think it was a strength coach, and no offense to the strength coaches out there, but they were saying that, teens are they're not organized if they're not able to get enough sleep for a 6 a.m. Strength session. And, they're like, they're not prioritizing sleep. It's simply because they just aren't going to bed early enough. And honestly, that is not true. So teenagers have a more tendency for melatonin to be released later. And so I wanted to bust this myth that teens are lazy for wanting to sleep in. It's actually biologically, they're designed to release melatonin later, which then makes them want to sleep in the morning. So they want to go to bed later, they want to sleep in later. But of course, that's challenging with school and having to get up early. So we really got to think of strategies on how to shift those rhythms to an earlier time. And if we look at this graph here, this is the different ages along the bottom, and then we have more of the early birds on the side here and the night owls up top. And this is in 25,000 people. And they find that around age 15, we start to shift more from the early bird into more of the night owl. So that's kind of the shift towards being more of a night owl. And of course, there is variability. So you may have some teens that are actually more morning types. But in general, the overall pattern is we start to see, in the late teens, early 20s, we see the highest peak in wanting to be a night owl. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it's about biology. And that's why there is a shift towards starting schools later, because we know that academic performance is better. There are less accidents. There are better mental health with later school start times. And so that's why there is a shift to make schools start later. Okay, so looking at the science of sleep summary. So we know that sleep serves vital functions for our health. I busted a few myths along the way. And then remember, those 3 keys to optimal sleep are about quantity, so 8 to 10 hours for a teenager; quality, so making sure you're falling asleep in less than 30 minutes if possible, not waking up too much during the night; and then timing to accommodate those biological laterness for being a night owl in those teenagers if possible. Okay, so let's talk about why sleep is important for an athlete. And I also put in here some stuff on academics as well. The first slide in this part 2 is different athletes along the bottom here. So this was in 2011, so it's a little bit older. There are some athletes that are retired, Usain Bolt and Steve Nash, et cetera. But this gives you an idea of different professional athletes and the amount of sleep that they're reporting across a 24-hour day. So here we see Roger Federer between 11 and 12 hours. We see Usain Bolt 8 to 10 hours, LeBron James 12 hours, Maria Sharapova 8 to 10 hours, Michelle Wie 10 to 12 hours, Steve Nash 10 hours. So yeah, in general, in these particular athletes, they are really prioritizing sleep because they know the benefits on their performance. We do see Tiger Woods here at 4 to 5, and I could make a bunch of jokes about that, but I'm going to refrain myself. And this is 2011, so his performance started to tank. So maybe it was related to the lack of sleep. But there are some athletes out there. I think Russell Wilson, I'm a Seahawks fan because I'm from Washington State, doesn't get as much sleep as you would expect, yet in the next moment he's promoting Bose headphones for sleeping. So there are some athletes out there who don't get as much sleep, but my argument would be, well, let's see what would happen if you would get more sleep. Your performance could be potentially a lot better. So I really love that slide. I think sleep helps with reaction time is a big one for athletes. So we have this particular study, after 20 hours without sleep, reaction time was greater than 0.05 blood alcohol level, so similar to being legally drunk. So in this particular study, they looked at reaction time with sleep deprivation and then reaction time with alcohol, and then they kind of compared the two and found that, after 20 hours without sleep, reaction time was similar to being legally drunk. There has been studies in athletes in particular. So quicker reaction time has been found in a number of studies, but I highlighted 3 of them here with related to swimmers off of the starting block. So that's really important. You got to get, even a fraction of a second edge by that buzzer goes off and you are right off the block. So that was found in swimmers. There was also a study in basketball players. So they found quicker reaction time and quicker sprint time for basketball players. And then also better reaction time for rugby players. And there's a number of other studies that have shown that sleep helps with reaction time, making it faster. I wanted to talk about school as well because, you know, you have to kind of, to be eligible, that's an important factor for, you know, college athletes, for example. But there are studies that have shown how poor sleep can lead to poor grades. So here we have a study where they just took all of the students, and they found that those who were getting C's, D's, and F's were actually averaging 30 minutes less sleep than those who are getting A's and B's. So that was a important study. And then there are actually a couple studies that have shown that sleep consistency is really important for grades. So what I mean by sleep consistency is you're going to bed and you're waking up at the similar time. And so my kind of rule of thumb is not to vary sleep. Like, you don't want to sleep in more than 90 minutes if possible. And I know that can be really challenging depending on what time you wake up during the week, but we don't want to start varying that by a lot because your brain and your body don't know when you should be awake and when you should be asleep. So having a consistent sleep schedule really gives you more energy, makes you more alert throughout the day. And potentially, if you can't get enough sleep at night during the week, you know, maybe sleep in a little bit on the weekend and supplement with a nap during the day, because it's really important to keep a consistent sleep schedule. So for this particular study, in college students, they found that irregular sleepers and consistent sleepers were getting equal amounts of sleep. But when they looked at their sleep consistency, those who were more regular sleepers had better sleep quality, they had earlier melatonin, and they had better grades. And this study was repeated more recently, showing that sleep consistency led to better academic performance during finals. So really sleep consistency is becoming more and more important for getting good academic performance. So something to keep in mind. I wanted to mention decision making as well. So in this first study, they found that those who were getting less than 8 hours, so here we have the less than 8 hours versus the more than 8 hours. And for all of these risky behaviors, they found that there was a higher percentage of reporting those risky behaviors if you were getting less than 8 hours versus an adolescent who is getting more than 8 hours. So there's more risk for risky behaviors with less sleep. And I think what's interesting is in this study too, a week of 5 hours per night led to riskier decisions. So this is only, you know, less than a week of 5 hours per night led to riskier decision. And I think the interesting part is that they didn't even realize they were making the risky decisions. So again, it's that disconnect in the brain where you think you're doing fine and in reality you aren't. So that's also something to keep in mind. Sleep helps athletes stay in the game. So I wanted to talk about immunity. Obviously, that's an important topic during these times. And this was chances of catching a cold when exposed to the cold virus, the rhinovirus. And what they did is they looked at their sleep coming into this exposure. And what they found was that those who were getting more than 7 hours, these are in adults, that there was, after being exposed to that cold virus, they had a 17% chance of catching the cold. But when they looked at those who were getting less than 5 hours, they found that there was a greater than 45% chance of catching a cold. So there is a lot of important biological, physiological processes going on during sleep that help with immunity. And again, it's not, it's not 100%. So if I'm getting 8 hours, there still is a chance I could catch that cold. And even with less than 5 hours, there's a chance that maybe I won't catch the cold. But again, it's showing a relationship between the more sleep that you get, the better overall your immunity is. And this also has been replicated in those getting a vaccine. So those who are sleep deprived leading into that vaccine actually produce less antibodies than those who are well rested going into that vaccine. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Sleep is going to help protect with immunity and help athletes stay in the game. This is athletes who sleep on average less than 8 hours per night or at almost a 2 times greater risk of being injured than those who are sleeping more than 8 hours, equal to or more than 8 hours. So a similar relationship, the less sleep that you're getting, typically the higher risk for injury. So summary for part 2, why sleep is important for an athlete. So I showed you that slide with the pros and how much sleep they were getting. I talked about sleep helping with decision making and reaction time, also helping with academics, and then helping athletes stay in the game as it relates to immunity and injury risk. Okay, let's go into part 3. So this is the fun part. These are the strategies. So what can you do as an athlete, a coach, a parent? What can we do here to really help our athletes get better sleep? Number 1, it starts with education. So it's great that St. Francis is putting together this seminar. What we find actually with education, sleep information sessions, that it does lead to a 20-minute increase in sleep duration per night. And this has been found in 3 different studies. However, it was not maintained 1 month later. So that's something to keep in mind. And so that's why I think it's important to have an individualized plan, which I'm going to share with you and you can access. And then also emphasizing sleep throughout the season. And this is where parents, I think, can really help. Emphasizing sleep and doing frequent check-ins with how the athlete and the teen is doing as it relates to their sleep. So this was a plan that I put together for a speed skater. So this particular speed skater, they were preparing for the Olympics and they thought they needed about 8 hours of sleep. So for this particular athlete, again, they need 8 hours of total sleep time, but needing to be in bed for about 9 hours. So they needed more time in bed in order to achieve that 8 hours. So in this particular athlete, they weren't really napping much, and this is a strategy I'm going to talk about. So for them, we said, okay, let's have you do a 20-minute nap between 1 and 4 p.m. on your training or competition days. Let's add in a 90-minute nap on your days off. So they had 1 day off per week. And then we started with their recommended wake up time. So this was their latest wake up time was 7:30. And we basically subtract 9 hours, because 9 hours in bed from 7:30 would put them in bed at 10:30 p.m. So this was kind of their, let's try and go to bed at 10:30 p.m. And an hour before that, we said, let's put away all your electronic devices. Let's dim the lights. Let's wear blue light blocking glasses about 2 hours before bed. And I wanted to show you my blue blockers here, which I should be wearing right now because I'm being exposed to all this bright light, but I'll spare you the embarrassment. We had them wear blue light blocking glasses to help protect from, the bright lights that were going on about 2 hours before bed, because that's when melatonin starts to get released. So this was a plan we put together, and it's crazy to think that all of these little additions added up to over an hour per night. So 30 minutes more of sleep per night is about 3.5 hours across the week. We added 3 20-minute naps is 1 hour. We added 1 90-minute nap, and then we added an hour sleep in on their days off, and that's 7 hours. And if you told someone to get an extra hour of sleep each night, I think that would be pretty challenging. But if we can kind of make up for it across the week, that's the way to do it. So this is the link to the sleep plan. And I think Matt's going to put it in the chat for you to check out. But let me show you what that looks like. So here's the plan. So you click on that link, and then here's the plan that comes up. So it talks a lot about the different interventions that I talk about. So increasing sleep across the week, keeping bedtimes and wake times consistent, improving overall sleep quality. And then there's a bunch of notes, and I know it's a little bit wordy, but at least you have all the information in there. But you can kind of develop your own schedule. So this is just a sample schedule, and depending on how your schedule varies across the week, you can put in, Monday, Wednesday, Friday here, Tuesday, Thursday, weekends here, and then adjust the schedule accordingly. And you want to start with, again, that wake up time, and then subtract from there the amount of sleep that you need, but add some time in bed because it takes you time to fall asleep, and also you may wake up during the night. And then from that bedtime, then you want to, subtract from there. So start your bedtime routine an hour before bedtime, put away your electronics, wear blue light blocking glasses potentially, and, add in naps and such. So that is the plan. And there's tips for the schedule in here. So napping, different breathing and relaxation techniques, and then like keeping your environment cool, dark, and quiet. So definitely check that out. Take advantage of that. I'd love to kind of put it in an app as well. So yeah, definitely check that out. And let me start here we go. Okay. All right, so the next strategy is to monitor sleep. So as I mentioned, I helped develop the athlete sleep screening questionnaire. So here is a link to that, and I think Matt will put that in the chat. So that will take you to centerforsleep.com, and this is what it's going to look like. And you go to the athlete sleep screening questionnaire, you just select, I'm a high performance athlete, and then you can get started on filling out the questionnaire. And this is looking at amount of sleep, quality of sleep, timing of sleep, are you napping? So definitely fill that out. You'll get the results emailed to you. You can share that with your coach. And this will tell you, do you have a sleep problem? So if you're scoring in the moderate to severe sleep categories, you need to seek help from a sleep professional. And so that may be some of the athletes that we saw, that 20% who were really dissatisfied with their sleep. So definitely check that out, and definitely take that quiz. And what we found in the Canadian Olympic team athletes that we were working with, we found that with sleep education, with getting those people help when they needed it, a lot of the severe to moderate started out that way. But after about 5 months after those recommendations, they improved their sleep significantly. So at time 3, 5 months later, the severe and the moderate were, down into the lower category. And so showing that about 25% had a severe to moderate sleep issue. But with these recommendations, with getting the help that they need, they were able to improve their sleep in the long run. So banking sleep, this is a huge strategy. I think for people, especially preparing, like even going into finals, going into midterms, banking sleep is going to help you perform better during that time. So an important competition, important academic period, you want to get more sleep leading into that period, and you will perform better. So this particular study found when they did sleep extension, this one was a bit longer. This was, I believe, 6 to 8 weeks of sleep extension, getting about an hour more per night. They found that they had better free throw percentage, faster sprint times, faster reaction time, better, I think it was 3-point percentage as well. And this particular study was it was a lot shorter period. I think this one was 2 weeks, and they found improved tennis serving accuracy by 6%. And then this study was 2 to 3 weeks as well in rugby players. And they found that reaction time was reduced by 4%. And also cortisol, that stress hormone, was reduced by 19% when they were getting more sleep. So that's important. It affects those physiological hormones as well. So having a pre-sleep routine, again, turning off those electronic devices, dimming the lights. A lot of athletes say, what do I do in that time? Like, I usually look at my device up until the minute I go to bed. And they're kind of at a loss for what they can actually include in the pre-sleep routine. So preparing for the next day, prep, maybe getting your clothes ready, getting your lunch ready, potentially during that hour before bedtime, taking a warm bath or shower, which has been shown to improve sleep quality and help people fall asleep quicker. Doing relaxing activities, so maybe a gratitude practice, writing a to-do list has been shown to help people fall asleep quicker. And you're just offloading all the thoughts. What do I have to do? You write it on a list right before bedtime, and it's just offloading those thoughts so that you can just focus on sleep and relaxation versus, oh, I have so many things I have to do. Breathing exercises, the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Breathe in for 4, a count of 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7, and then you breathe out for 8. You repeat that 4 times. Potentially doing the cognitive shuffle. So you think of a word such as bedtime, you imagine all the objects that you can that start with B: ball, baby, bag, bus. When you can't think of any more, you move on to the next letter: E: eagle, egg, ear. And then by the time you get to the end of the word, hopefully you'll be sound asleep. So you can use that for falling asleep at the beginning of the night. Maybe if you had a late training or a competition, when those pick up again, this will help, relax and activate that parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxation system. Stretching as well, reading a paper book, all of those have been shown to improve overall sleep quality. So those are definitely some things you can add into your pre-sleep routine. Providing nap opportunities. So naps have many benefits. So reducing sleepiness, heightening alertness, increasing concentration, enhancing motor performance, and also boosting mood as well. So naps are really great. I'm definitely an advocate for naps, and it doesn't have to be 2 hours out of your day. It could be a 15-minute nap, can show these types of benefits. What we find in our Canadian national team athletes is that a third of them don't even nap at all. And about 80% are only napping, 2 times or less per week. So this is a really big area I think that people can take advantage of. And I know you have school, but potentially adding in a 10-minute nap, maybe in between classes, or even right after school, which normally I wouldn't recommend napping that late, but I think wherever you can get it, and as long as it's not impacting your ability to fall asleep at night, I say go for it. So duration of the nap, it can be less than 20 minutes. You'd maybe want to set your alarm for 30 minutes if you want to take more of that power nap to give yourself time to fall asleep. And if you don't fall asleep within 10 minutes, reset your alarm and try again. For more of that longer nap, this can be a little scary for people to not set an alarm because, you might want to set an emergency alarm, let's say 2 hours out, and you want to just wake up naturally after a complete sleep cycle. So for those longer naps, maybe set an emergency alarm, but try and wake up before, because you'll feel more refreshed from that. And then timing between 1 and 4 p.m., I may stretch that a little bit out as long as it's not impacting your ability to fall asleep at night. And then environment like a cave. So this goes for your nighttime sleep as well, keeping it cool, dark, and quiet. Potentially using an eye mask, having headphones for white noise if you're in a really noisy area. And again, using those techniques that I mentioned before, writing a to-do list, doing the 4-7-8 breathing, which is all in that optimal plan, taking 10 deep breaths, doing the cognitive shuffle, which you'll find in the optimal sleep plan that was in the link earlier. And finally, I wanted to talk about using caffeine strategically. Caffeine impacts our ability to fall asleep, and it can be harmful for overall sleep quality. Personally, I drink decaf. I used to drink a lot of coffee during grad school. And once I got off the coffee, the caffeine, I've been sleeping so much better. I just feel like my overall sleep quality is improved with drinking decaf. I know that's a bit extreme, and some people don't necessarily need to go that extreme, but for me, that was really good to go decaf. In this particular study with Super Rugby athletes, they found that about 20% pulled all-nighters after having caffeine during an evening game. And of course, there are many, many different factors. It's not just about the caffeine that made them pull the all-nighter. But it was interesting that a lot of the athletes had caffeine during that 7 p.m. match. And a number of them were pulling all-nighters, which can take a very, very long time to recover from. I worked on a study where we did 3 all-nighters. So they would come in, we'd give them well-rested 2 nights of 12 hours in bed, and then we would sleep deprive them for a full night. And even after that first 12-hour night, they were not recovered performance-wise from that amount of sleep deprivation. And after the second 12-hour, they were starting to get there. So it can take a lot to recover from an all-nighter. And then related to caffeine, so we are different metabolizers of caffeine. So that's something to keep in mind as well. We have different genes that tell us how fast we metabolize the caffeine. So in this particular study, they found that 4 milligrams per kilogram of caffeine prior to a cycling time trial actually impaired performance by 14% in those who were slow metabolizers. When they took that caffeine an hour before the time trial, they actually did worse than when they weren't taking the caffeine. So this is something I think you really need to keep in mind, how caffeine impacts you. Okay, so we have the quiz. I know we're running out of time, so go ahead and join the quiz here at slido.com. So enter in your name. We'll open this up to everyone too, parents and coaches. So go ahead and join the quiz here. So we got 13 people joining, 16. Keep them coming. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide. So I'm gonna ask the question. So the question is, how much sleep should a high school athlete get? And then you'll have a limited amount of time to actually put the amount or the correct question here. So let me go to that next question. So how much sleep should a high school athlete get? Make sure you input your number and then hit submit, and we will see what the results are. Okay, good. 85% put 8 to 10 hours. So yes, 8 to 10 hours. Again, maybe a little bit more because you are an athlete. 8 to 10 hours is the recommended amount for a teenager. So that is the correct answer, the 8 to 10 hours. Let's see what the next question is. Oh, here we have our leaderboard. Cameron, Z, S, Lucy, Jane, nice work. All right, what should your sleep environment be like? Should it be like a roller coaster, a cave, an ocean, a starry night? Go ahead and put in your answer and submit. Okay, great. So cave, 77% put cave. So remember, we want to keep it cool, dark, and quiet, just like a cave. That's what we want our sleep environment to be like. Okay, Cameron, Jane, Lucy, Est, Andrew, nice work. All right, here's a good one. What are some strategies to add into your sleep routine? This is a quick one. You got to answer there are multiple answers here. What should we add into our sleep routine? Select as many correct answers as you can, and we'll see what that looks like. Okay, so drinking a soothing green tea. So we don't want caffeine before bedtime, so that wouldn't be a right answer. Maybe an herbal tea. You could add that into your sleep routine, pre-sleep routine for sure. Breathing exercises, great job. 94% reported that. Alcohol, I didn't talk about that, but that can be an issue with high school athletes. It helps you fall asleep quicker, but it disturbs your sleep later on in the night. So it's not a good thing. Taking a 10-minute nap, again, that could be, but in the hour before bed, probably not within that pre-sleep routine. Writing a to-do list, good work. Cognitive shuffle, stretching, putting away the electronics. I love it. 95%, the highest answer. And then a cool bath or shower. Remember, I mentioned a warm bath or shower. So great work. Okay, so Est, Andrew, Christina, Clove, Leah, great work. Okay, last question. What is the best strategy to help with a poor night's sleep prior to an important competition? So this is a strategy you could use in leading into academic performance, an important competition. I talked about this strategy. Okay, great. So banking sleep. This is a great strategy for you to utilize as you lead into an important competition, a sleep deprivation period, into finals, into midterms. That is a great strategy for you to utilize because you will perform better if you get more sleep leading into that. Okay, so champions, we had two people, Est and Cheston. Looks like you guys got 4 out of 4. Great work. Thank you everyone for participating. I hope you enjoyed that. And then I just want to do my summary slide here. Remember the strategies that I talked about, education and emphasizing the importance of sleep, banking sleep, monitoring sleep. So using that athlete sleep screening questionnaire and the link that I sent you. Pre-sleep routine is important, using caffeine strategically, and then also nap opportunities as well. I do have a quick 1-minute survey. If you could go here, I think Matt's going to put that in the chat box. And sorry, I did take up, I think we have a little bit of time for questions. So let's open it up to some questions. And I will stop sharing here and we can answer some questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Doctor. There's some really just great stuff in there. You answered a bunch of the questions as the night sort of went on, especially about napping. There were a ton of questions about napping that came in. And so maybe I'll just go over that just a little bit. Are they good? One of the questions was, if I don't get enough sleep during the night, if I only get 5 hours sleep during the night, is a nap during the day, can I count that towards my total? You went over that just a little bit, but and then just a broad question, you could tell it was from the parents saying, is it okay for teenagers to nap? Is that a normal thing? So maybe just a little bit more on napping and your thoughts on that.
Yes, I didn't actually talk about maybe swimmers who don't have enough opportunity to sleep at night, and so they would want to supplement with a longer nap during the day. So that is something to consider. If you can't get enough sleep at night, you do want to take a longer nap during the day to make up for that sleep loss. So I didn't necessarily mention that, but I think it's something for people to think about. Supplementing with a longer nap to kind of make up for some of that lost sleep. Absolutely, you can do that. And yes, I highly encourage napping for teens. It's just a way to add to kind of bank some of that sleep throughout the week. So definitely adding naps into your routine, potentially even adding it in as like a training, okay, I'm going to schedule this in as if it's a training. I'm going to schedule in a 30-minute nap. I highly recommend.
Awesome. A couple more just parents on here. Why do kids sleep so much? A lot of people talking about their child sleeping till all hours of the morning and the day. Why do kids sleep so much? And maybe even you mentioned the melatonin cycle a little bit. I know you talked about that. Maybe a little bit more detail on that kind of cycle, and a few of the questions here about taking melatonin to help people fall asleep also came up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really challenging for teens to get enough sleep during the week because of all, having to get up early for school. And hopefully that's helped a lot. It seemed as if when we looked at that word cloud that people were actually sleeping longer. And hopefully that's a function of that. So I think it's really challenging for teens to get enough sleep. So then they're trying to make up for that sleep loss on the weekends. So trying those strategies, such as having a pre-sleep routine, will help teens to be able to go to bed earlier. Also, getting lots of light in the morning and blocking light at night is going to help that melatonin rhythm shift earlier. So I mentioned that teens have a tendency to be night owls and their melatonin is being released later. Well, we can actually do something about that by having lots of light in the morning, and maybe even one of those light alarm clocks that kind of gets brighter and brighter and brighter as you get closer to the alarm. Those have been found to be useful for teenagers and help them wake up quicker. So, and having lots of light in the morning, maybe even potentially a light box, or I do have these light glasses that I use primarily for jet lag. So you just wear them, and then I don't know if, I wonder if I have any juice in here. This can be a way, so you wear it like this and it shoots out light. This can be a way to help shift those rhythms earlier so that the melatonin isn't being released as late. Now, as far as melatonin, exogenous melatonin goes, we need to be really careful about that, because one study showed that only 20% of all of the samples of melatonin on the shelf were within the 20% of what the label was telling them. 80% were not what the label was saying. So if it said 10 milligrams of melatonin, 80% of those did not have 10 milligrams of melatonin. Could have been more, could have been less. So you have to have a really good brand of melatonin. And I think melatonin can be useful to help shift rhythms earlier, shift those circadian rhythms so that melatonin can be released earlier and teens can get to bed earlier. But primarily melatonin isn't good for trying to fall asleep quickly. It's more for shifting the rhythms to an earlier time. So I think it could be useful, and it's generally safe, but potentially some of those other strategies may work even better.
Other question about falling asleep and other types of sleep aids, NyQuil, sleeping pills, that type of thing. I think I know where you're going to go with that, but maybe just talk about those a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of people think if it's over the counter, it's safe and effective, but it's not. You can become reliant on it, and it can lead to more grogginess. So, yeah, there are better, more effective treatments out there. So for someone who's really suffering from insomnia, potentially doing cognitive behavioral therapy, 4 to 5 sessions is the gold standard treatment for insomnia. So there's much better treatments out there. I think somebody in the chat mentioned tart cherry juice. Tart cherry juice, potentially, there has been some studies shown that it leads to better production of melatonin and can also be useful for training adaptations as well. So yeah, I don't personally use that. I think there's a bunch of other big rocks that can be utilized here. But you could play around with some tart cherry juice. Also, kiwis have been shown. So kiwi fruit, 1 to 2 hours before bedtime has been shown to increase melatonin. But again, I think there's a lot other better strategies that I talked about.
That kind of gets that one that was in the chat there too, about foods that you recommend to promote sleeping. A couple of kids asked, you could tell they were kids for sure, asked in the other chat that, is there anything that I can do when I get 7 hours, 8 hours sleep and still feel tired? Anything to help out with that?
I think having a more consistent schedule is going to be really helpful for that. So if you, it may be that that person is waking up, just their schedule is so inconsistent that their brain and their body doesn't really know when to be awake and when to be asleep. So I think consistency could really help with energy levels, feeling great during the day. And it could be that you need more sleep too. I think that could be a factor as well, because there is some variability in the amount of sleep that teens need. And of course, if you're getting, let's say 7.5, 8, I would maybe try and get a little bit more sleep and keep that schedule consistent as possible to see if that helps. Yeah. And then make sure you definitely check out the sleep screening tool, because there could be an underlying sleep disorder as well. It's not as prevalent in this age group, but it could be a possibility.
A couple more that we can sort of narrow it down to. Somebody asked about tips for falling back asleep at night. And I know you mentioned the cognitive shuffle. Could you just go over that one more time? Because I think I'm going to use it. And so if you could just kind of maybe go over that one more time for me, that's a selfish question. But yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I actually have a variation on that as well that I'll talk about. So you think of a word such as bedtime, and let's say, so then you start with that first letter. So B. So you imagine all the objects that you can, or even people that start with B. And as soon as you can't think of any more, then you move on to the next letter. So B, ball, baby, bag, bus, banana. When you can't think of any more and you're imagining them, you move on to the next letter, E, eagle, egg, ear, and then D, dog. I don't know. Dog, day. I'm drawing a blank on
You're
D.
going to fall asleep.
Yeah. And then you basically work your way till the end of the word. Now there is a variation of this that I use with my kids. So my kids are 8, 6, and 3. I don't use it with the 3-year-old, but you think of a color actually, and you imagine all the objects you can with that color. So red, raspberry, strawberry, a red chair, a red sweater. And it's just kind of simulating what your brain does when it falls asleep. And it's also taking your mind off being awake, because you wake up in the middle of the night and you're mad and you don't, like, I want to get back to sleep. And it kind of takes your mind off being awake, and it really simulates what your mind does when you fall asleep.
Thank you, Doc. That's going to help me quite a bit. Just a couple more, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A few questions about electronic devices, Fitbits, the new Swoop bands, and all those different things. Good, bad, one better than the other. Any recommendations on that type of electronic device?
Yeah, so I have a Garmin Forerunner, and I'm a sleep scientist, and I do not wear this thing to sleep. So that's kind of my short answer, is that they just aren't that effective at tracking sleep. Now, I will say that they're pretty good at like overall kind of sleep quantity, the amount of sleep that you're getting. Where it really struggles is with it predicting the deep sleep that you're getting, the REM sleep that you're getting. They just aren't sophisticated enough to do that. You really need EEG. You need to look at the brain waves to know that information. But I mean, I think if it's motivating you, they can be useful in some instances. I just would be cautious about it, about you really following what it's telling you. So there is a condition called orthosomnia where you get so obsessed about good sleep. And I've had so many messages for people saying, my watch is telling me I'm not getting enough deep sleep. Like, what do I need to be doing? And in one case, it was a setting factor. It was like their sensitivity was too low. So in general, I think if it's help motivating you get more sleep, then go for it. But I wouldn't be letting it make me become anxious, because I think it could lead to, oh my gosh, my watch told me I got a score of an 80. Oh, I'm going to perform so bad, So I think it just kind of depends on the person as to how you want to utilize it.
One person asked about changing time zones for competitions or travel or those sorts of things. Any tricks for being at top performance for that?
Yeah, it's probably not too much of an issue until you travel like internationally. Potentially, I know if you're going California, you're in the same time zone. But some of the strategies I would utilize would be, I could do a whole talk on this, but potentially, like if you're traveling east to Europe, you want to go to bed earlier, wake up earlier. You want to block light at night using blue blockers. You want to get lots of light in the morning. You probably want to shift your meals an hour earlier. And you want to start shifting this about 3 days prior to departure. So yeah, getting lots of light in the morning, waking up earlier, going to bed earlier, and shift an hour each day in the 3 days prior to departure. If you're traveling back west, you want to do the opposite. So you want to block light in the morning. So wear those blue blockers in the morning, get lots of light in the evening, and go to bed later, because that'll help shift you more towards that time zone. And I recently, prior to the pandemic, I went overseas to Europe and I tried some of these strategies. I met my friend in the Netherlands, and she was shocked at how little jet lag I had. So I think, yes, these strategies can be useful and really, really help prevent some jet lag.
Yeah. Very cool. The blue blockers, you've mentioned them quite a bit. Somebody just asked, well, what do they really do? I know a lot of kids are wearing them and stuff, but what benefit does it actually have?
Are a lot of kids wearing them? I would be so happy.
They are actually wearing them, yep, especially because we're online and stuck at home. I think they might be a little bit more fashion, trendy for some of them, but they are actually wearing them at home. So
that is amazing.
Yep.
I love that. Well, so there's two different types. So you can get blue light blocking for protecting against eye strain during the day. What I'm talking about is 99% blue blockers. So they're the dark orange, the dark red. And what happens is the blue light from our screen sends a signal to our brain to wake up, which is not good before bedtime. So in the 2 hours before bedtime, I don't wear these all the time. So for example, if you're getting lots of light exposure outside, your circadian system is more alerting and more melatonin is being produced. So if you're getting lots of light exposure outside, especially in the morning, you may not need to wear these to affect you. So yeah, what I'm trying to say, I actually did a recent post on this where I had measured my light levels in my office where I'm at right now, and the light levels were about 100 lux. And then I went outside on a cloudy day and they were at like 20,000 lux. So light outside is way more powerful than our indoor lighting, and light helps regulate our circadian rhythm. So light in the morning is going to help us get better sleep quality at night. Light at night can impact our sleep quality by reducing our melatonin. So these blue light blockers, they're 99% blue light blockers, and they're making sure that blue light is not getting into sending the signal to my brain to wake up. So that's kind of the theory behind it. And I would recommend 2 hours before bedtime. And I would not recommend wearing these in the morning, because that's when I want that alerting signal to the brain. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, they're definitely not wearing those big orange ones. They're definitely more like
Grandma,
the other ones. But you never
grandma
know. Hey,
style.
you might start a trend tonight. You might start a trend. Okay, last one from me, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Plavsky for a closing. A couple kids mentioned that they're not sleeping well, and then they stress about it, and it's this sort of vicious cycle of stressing about sleeping. Any sort of advice or any sort of thing to help with that kind of cycle that they're in?
Yeah, that's really challenging because it can create a vicious cycle. You're not getting good sleep, you know the importance, you're not getting good sleep. That leads to potentially, more stress hormones related to that, which then leads to a poor night's sleep. My recommendation would be, those cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. So changing the way you're thinking about your sleep, changing the behaviors, and then incorporating some sleep hygiene techniques. And there's a good book, Sink into Sleep by Judith Davidson. She utilizes a lot of those cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. There are a number of online programs. So Shut Eye, if you just Google CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, you'll be able to find a number of online programs that you can utilize. There isn't one necessarily designed specifically for athletes. I think that there's a need for that, but there are a lot out there that you can help utilize and take advantage of in an online environment without having a therapist.
Awesome. So before we close tonight, I just wanted to let people know that our talk is being recorded tonight, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. So feel free to pass that on and tell people that weren't able to be here tonight that that talk is available on our YouTube channel. We'll have a link through our social media pages on that. So Dr. Bender, on the behalf of St. Francis High School and our athletic department, I just want to thank you for your time tonight. Tremendous amount of really valuable information for our community and our student athletes and their families. So I just want to thank you again, and thank all the participants for being here tonight and listening to the presentation. So have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all your participation as well. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got a lot out of it. And yeah, sleep well.
Great. Thank you. Good night, everybody.